I never, ever imagined that a calm Saturday morning could transform into the biggest nightmare of my life, all thanks to a single name, Karen. Yep, you heard that right. A larger-than-life, self-appointed HOA queen who decided my rental house needed a makeover by way of an actual bulldozer. One minute I'm sipping my coffee, scrolling through emails, feeling pretty good about life, and the next I'm on the phone with my frantic tenant who's screaming that Karen's flattening my property and claiming she owns it. You can't make this stuff up. Hey, before we jump into this wild story, I have a small favor to ask. If you could take a second to hit that like button and subscribe, it would really help our channel grow and bring you even more crazy stories like this one. Also, we love seeing where our audience is tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let us know which city you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far our community is spreading. My name's Jordan Harris, and a while back I decided to invest in a few rental properties around town. I'm not some real estate mogul, just a regular guy who thought, hey, maybe owning a couple of houses could be a good long-term plan. I found the perfect place in a quaint suburb called Sunnyvale Hills, which always seemed like it was right out of a postcard. Tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and a local HOA that allegedly kept everything tidy. The house itself was a charming mid-century bungalow, complete with a picket fence, a little worn but still cute, and a spacious yard filled with wildflowers. I rented it out to Carla and Miguel, a lovely couple who loved gardening and took immaculate care of the house. For months, everything was bliss. No problems, no weird drama, just normal suburban life, or so I believed. But little did I know one of the neighbors had an intense passion for regulating our community, a towering, sharp-eyed woman who introduced herself simply as Karen. I remember the first time I met her. She strolled over in a crisp pastel suit like she was about to attend a high society luncheon and introduced herself with an unsettlingly sweet smile. "Ah, so you're the landlord," she said, voice dripping with a sort of fake hospitality. "I've been dying to meet you. Our little neighborhood has standards, you understand." I nodded politely, not suspecting anything more than the usual HOA chatter. But the second I turned my back, I swear I felt a chill roll down my spine. That was the day I unknowingly stepped into Karen's crosshairs. The first few weeks after our awkward introduction, Karen's presence was mostly confined to friendly suggestions. She'd leave neon post-it notes on Carla and Miguel's door about how they should color coordinate their flowers, or how their garden gnome upset the aesthetic balance of the block. It was petty, but we tried to laugh it off. Then the official notices started appearing. Carla called me one evening with a shaky laugh. "Jordan, you won't believe this. Karen stuck a big sign on our fence that says, 'Out of compliance, demolition pending.' Is she serious?" I drove over to see for myself. Sure enough, there was a bright orange poster with sloppy scrawl claiming HOA authority. I blinked a few times, certain it was some weird practical joke. It looked like a homemade collage, complete with random stickers of frowning faces, no joke, and highlighted text saying, "Demolition in 14 days. I tore it down. "Don't worry," I told Carla and Miguel. "This has to be a misunderstanding. I'll talk to the actual HOA board." The real board confirmed my suspicions. No, Karen had zero authority to issue citations, and no, they never approved any demolition. They promised to speak with her. I figured that'd be the end of it. Obviously, I underestimated Karen's determination. A couple of days later, I was inspecting the fence, just to make sure it wasn't about to crumble or something, when Karen popped up behind me like a ghost. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Well, if it isn't the absentee landlord," she said, arms folded like a stern librarian. "Have you decided to comply with our neighborhood standards, or do I need to escalate the matter?" I forced a smile. "Karen, I spoke to the HOA board. They told me there's no problem with the fence and that you're not authorized to issue citations." Her eyes widened like a startled cat. "Not authorized?" she hissed. "I run this neighborhood. Without me, the property values would plummet. I'm the only one brave enough to enforce the rules. They might be fine letting just anyone degrade our streets, but I'm not." I tried to stay calm. "Look, my tenants are respectful. They keep the place clean and the fence is safe. Unless there's a real regulation I'm missing, I think we're done here." Karen let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, Jordan, you'll regret dismissing me. I've taken down bigger men than you." Then she spun on her heel and marched off, leaving me standing there, thoroughly unsettled. I half expected the theme from some dramatic TV show to start playing in the background. Carla and Miguel called me in a panic about a week later. Karen had apparently strolled into the backyard unannounced while they were hosting a small barbecue and started taking photos of the exterior walls. She claimed she was documenting code violations. Meanwhile, the poor guests looked on, spatulas still in hand, not sure if they were starring in a horror flick or a twisted sitcom. When Carla confronted her, politely at first, Karen snapped, "Oh, don't mind me. I'm just collecting evidence. If you want to keep living here, you'd better fix all these glaring issues." "What issues?" Miguel asked, baffled. Karen rattled off a list that included inappropriate color scheme, grill smoke pollution, and flowers that attract too many bees. According to her, bees were a dangerous infestation. Carla tried to keep a straight face. "Dangerous? They're pollinators. They're great for the flowers." Karen snorted. "Flowers that bring bees? That's an HOA hazard. And you," she pointed at Miguel, "you've got cars parked in the driveway at an angle I find suspicious." Miguel looked at his perfectly normal parking job. "Suspicious of what, exactly?" Karen only glared. "You'll find out soon enough," she said, then stomped off, leaving an awkward hush over the barbecue. I rushed over when I heard, but by the time I arrived, she was gone. My tenants were shaken, but I tried to reassure them. "Don't worry, we have rights. She can't just barge in. If she does it again, we'll call the police." Little did I know, we'd be calling the police for something far more dramatic in the near future. For a short while, Karen's aggression died down. Maybe the actual HOA had scolded her, or maybe she was biding her time. We'd see her lurking every now and then, though, peering out from behind hedges, scribbling in her ever-present notebook, or creeping by in her SUV at suspiciously slow speeds. One night, I was repairing a leaky faucet when Carla phoned me, voice trembling. "Jordan, Karen's car is parked outside. She's just sitting there. The headlights are off, but I can see her silhouette. She's been there for nearly an hour." My stomach twisted. "Lock your doors, call the non-emergency line, and report a suspicious vehicle. I'll be there soon." By the time I arrived, the car was gone. Part of me wondered if we were blowing things out of proportion. Maybe she was just an eccentric neighbor who took her volunteer HOA policing too seriously. But my gut said otherwise. Something about Karen felt unhinged, like she was just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Unfortunately, I soon found out just how far she was willing to go. Early one Saturday morning, I was in the middle of making pancakes. I'll be honest, they were more like slightly burnt Frisbees that day, when I got a frantic call from Carla. She was practically screaming, "Jordan, you need to get here right now. Karen's tearing down the fence with a bulldozer." I almost dropped the phone. "A bulldozer? Are you sure?" Miguel came on the line, shouting over a deafening engine noise. "Yes, a real bulldozer. She hired some guy. It's out in the yard, and she's telling him it's her property." I raced to my car, heart hammering, and dialed 911. The dispatcher sounded incredulous when I explained that a neighbor was bulldozing my property, but they assured me officers were on the way. When I pulled up to the house, I saw the fence partially collapsed and a huge bulldozer rolling over the flower beds. Dust and debris everywhere. Carla and Miguel stood on the sidewalk in their pajamas, helplessly watching as their entire yard got annihilated. And there, commanding this spectacle, was Karen, in a neon orange vest, arms raised like a twisted conductor orchestrating a demolition symphony. "You're doing great!" she shouted to the confused operator. "Knock down that ugly house next!" I jumped out of my car, adrenaline rushing. "Stop! Shut it down!" I waved my arms at the bulldozer driver. The poor man hesitated, looking from me to Karen. Karen jabbed a finger in my direction. "Ignore him! I'm the rightful owner. He's trespassing on my land." "Trespassing!" I spat, shock mixing with fury. "I own this house, Karen. This is insane." She waved some random stack of papers in the air. "According to these official documents, you abandoned the property, so I'm reclaiming it for the HOA. Your time is up." I couldn't even form words. I just gestured at the carnage. You realize you're committing a crime, right? You can't just bulldoze someone's house because you feel like it. She let out a cackle that still haunts my dreams. We'll see who's committing a crime when the real authorities arrive. Right on cue, police sirens blared. An officer hopped out and shouted for the bulldozer driver to power down. The driver, looking spooked, cut the engine. Clouds of dust settled as the massive machine came to a grinding halt. Karen turned on the officer. "Arrest him!" she pointed at me. "He's an intruder, and I have the paperwork to prove it." The officer glanced at her so-called paperwork and frowned deeply. "Ma'am, this isn't valid. Where did you even get—" Karen stomped her foot. "I'm done explaining myself to amateurs. I'm the official HOA enforcer. That fence is in violation, so it's coming down. Now, if you don't mind, officer, kindly remove this man so we can proceed." The cop exchanged a look with his partner, then addressed Karen in a carefully calm tone. "Ma'am, this is private property. There's no record of ownership switching to you. You need to stand down immediately, or we'll have no choice but to charge you with trespassing and property damage." She let out the loudest, most dramatic gasp I'd ever heard, like a Victorian lady who just found out she'd lost the family fortune. "How dare you!" she screeched, turning an alarming shade of red. "I've given my life to maintaining property values here, and this is the thanks I get?" I tried to speak up, but the cop motioned for me to wait. They needed to calm Karen down first. It took nearly 10 minutes of back and forth before the officers convinced the bulldozer operator to leave. He apologized 1,000 times, explaining that Karen had paid him up front and insisted everything was totally legit. Karen, still fuming, shook her fist at me like a cartoon villain. "You think you've won? Ha! This isn't over, Jordan!" With the bulldozer fiasco over, at least for the moment, I stood amidst the wreckage of my ruined fence, trying to compute the thousands of dollars in damage. Carla and Miguel looked traumatized, and who could blame them? They'd just witnessed their yard get partially flattened by a neighbor with a questionable grasp on reality. I filed for a restraining order the same day, armed with police reports and photographic evidence of the carnage. The judge granted it without hesitation, banning Karen from coming within 100 feet of the property or my tenants. For a brief moment, I thought, finally, I can breathe. Wrong again. About a week later, Carla sent me a link to an online listing. The text read, "Charming plot of land in Sunnyvale Hills, price to sell, ready for demolition." The photos were clearly of my battered fence and partially damaged yard. The contact info was a phone number, listed under Karen's Sell Now. She was literally trying to sell my property online as a teardown project. I nearly dropped my phone in disbelief. "Okay," I muttered to myself, "this is next-level crazy." I got in touch with the website support, showed them my documents proving I owned the place, and demanded they take down the fraudulent post. They complied, but I was left wondering how many other sites she'd used to advertise her property. Meanwhile, the rumor mill in Sunnyvale Hills was in full swing. I started getting calls from neighbors I barely knew, asking if it was true that Karen bought me out. Others called to tell me about how Karen had approached them, claiming I was a shady landlord who'd forfeited my rights. At some point, she'd even staged a yard sign that read, "Property of Karen, do not enter." One neighbor, Mr. Diaz, took a picture, chuckling as he texted it to me with the caption, "She's lost her mind, right?" "Yes, Mr. Diaz. Indeed, she had." One evening, Carla invited me over for a small gathering to support each other. She and Miguel had decided to stick around, at least for now, because they loved the house. We grilled some burgers, no Karen in sight, thank heavens, and started swapping stories with a few neighbors who dropped by. "Karen once fined me $50 for having a front door that contrasted too sharply with the trim," said Rhonda, an older neighbor with a wry smile. "She taped the invoice right to my mailbox and demanded a check made out to her personally." Miguel nearly choked on his burger, laughing. "Did you pay?" "Absolutely not," Rhonda smirked. "When I told her I'd spoken with the HOA, she threatened to sue me for defamation. That was the end of that conversation." We all cracked up in that weird, half-nervous way you do when you realize you've been living next to a ticking time bomb. I half expected Karen to leap out of the bushes, brandishing another bulldozer invoice. With the restraining order in place, Karen had to keep her distance, at least physically. But that didn't stop her from driving by at all hours, creeping along at a snail's pace, staring daggers at anyone in the yard. Sometimes, if Carla happened to be outside watering her flowers, Karen would roll down the window and shout something like, "Enjoy it while you can, traitor," before speeding off. It was unnerving, but at least she wasn't physically on the property. Until, of course, she decided to ignore the restraining order altogether. One afternoon, I swung by to drop off a new set of keys for Carla and Miguel. I'd changed the locks after all that craziness. As I walked around the side of the house, I heard a strange thumping sound. Following the noise, I turned the corner and my jaw nearly hit the ground. There was Karen, wearing old jeans and a baggy sweatshirt, a stark contrast to her usual pastel suits. She was swinging a sledgehammer at the back steps, each blow sending splinters of wood flying. Her hair was wild, and her eyes had the manic glint of someone who'd lost all sense of reality. "Karen, what the— Stop!" I yelled, adrenaline spiking. She froze mid-swing, then slowly turned to face me. "You!" she said, voice dripping with venom. "You forced my hand. I tried to do this the easy way, but nobody listens to me. The house must come down. It's an eyesore and a disease to our perfect neighborhood." I swallowed hard. "This is not your property. You realize you're literally breaking the law right now? There's a restraining order." She let out a bark of laughter that sent chills through me. "You think I care about your worthless piece of paper? This place belongs to me. I am the HOA. I am the caretaker of Sunnyvale Hills. And you're just—" her voice quivered with anger— "in my way." My hand shook as I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911. Karen screeched, raising the sledgehammer as though she might come at me next. Fortunately, Carla and Miguel, hearing the commotion, rushed outside. Carla shouted, "Karen, get away from here. The cops are on their way." Karen flashed a crazed smile. "Let them come. Maybe the bulldozer can beat them here. This place is going down today." In that moment, I genuinely feared for all our safety. But ironically, the police arrived in record time. Perhaps the dispatch recognized the address from the last fiasco. 2 squad cars rolled up and officers jumped out, hands on their holsters. Karen swung the sledgehammer into the back steps one last time as the officers yelled, "Drop the weapon! Now!" She let it clatter to the ground and whipped around, tears of rage streaming down her face. "You don't understand!" she wailed, pointing at me. "He's the criminal! He's the one stealing my land!" I forced myself to stay calm, explaining to the officers that this was the same woman from the bulldozer incident, that I had a restraining order, and that she was in clear violation of it, plus about a dozen other laws. One officer carefully approached Karen, speaking in a soothing tone. "Ma'am, we understand you're upset, but you need to come with us. You're under arrest for trespassing, vandalism, and violating a court order." Karen let out a howl like a wounded wolf. She actually lunged for the sledgehammer again, but the officer was quicker. He pinned her arms behind her back. She tried kicking him, screaming something about how the entire city government was in on the conspiracy. It took both officers to get her cuffed and into the squad car. The last glimpse I had was her face pressed against the window, mouth twisted in a furious snarl, screaming unintelligible threats as the car pulled away. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of filing insurance claims, gathering repair estimates, and making multiple court appearances. Between the damage from the bulldozer, the wrecked fence, and Karen's sledgehammer spree, the property needed a thorough overhaul. The front yard looked like a construction zone, and the back steps were taped off for safety. But at least we could do the repairs without constantly looking over our shoulders, waiting for Karen to pop up with her next stunt.